Lolcows have become an essential source of entertainment for a lot of people on the internet. Daniel Larson and Chris Chan are probably the most famous examples of people who shouldn't have stepped foot onto social media. But this is by no means just an American phenomenon. This is the story of Rainer Winkler, aka Drachenlord, Germany's biggest lolcow and one of the worst humans to ever have an online career. We're going to take a look at his life, his mistakes, his trolls, and his crimes. Meddl on. Rainer Winkler was born on August 2, 1989 in Neustadt an der Aisch and spent most of his life in the tiny village of Altschauerberg, just about 20 miles outside of Nuremberg, Bavaria's second largest city. We don't know too much about his childhood, but according to his own accounts and those of his peers, his family life wasn't ideal and shaped by arguments and loneliness. His father, Rudolf Winkler, worked as a lorry driver, and his mother, Rita Winkler, was a stay-at-home mom. He visited a special needs school in Bad Windsheim and got his leaving certificate after 9 years in school. After that, he worked for a temporary employment agency and did a couple of different manual labor jobs. That's also the time when the biggest change in his life occurred. Rainer's father passed away on July 3, 2011 at the age of 57 years due to prostate cancer. Despite their arguably bad relationship, he still was Rainer's biggest role model and also a strong advocate against the installment of an internet connection in his home. Rainer then inherited the family home, the so-called Drachenschanze, and was able to do whatever he wanted after his mother and sister left the home and after he sent his grandmother into a retirement home. Rainer was alone now, which would become the theme for his ongoing years. In a 7-room house with multiple auxiliary buildings and no responsibilities. He then decided to finally get himself an internet connection. This was the beginning of the Drachen game. Rainer's first videos on YouTube were fairly innocent. He mainly dealt with content about metal music, whether it was dance videos or horribly researched summaries of bands and albums, which he ripped off straight from Wikipedia and was barely able to pronounce correctly.
The last temperation of Christ, disciples of the Drachenlord, Whiling Wall, Die Alone, Horo Ceremony, Sauter, Conturiot, Welkas the Stalker, Confusion.
The quality of his uploads was ridiculous, to say the least. But we must not forget that this was 2013, so despite big content creators' professional productions, a lot of smaller YouTubers were still publishing relatively mediocre videos without this being too much of a problem, so Rainer didn't stand out of the crowd per se. After a while, he tried to copy the ideas of larger German content creators and created sketch comedy, let's plays and videos in which he answered viewers' questions. He attracted trolls pretty early in his career, but in the beginning they mostly tried to make fun of him by asking silly questions which he wouldn't understand or make more or less snide remarks in the comment sections. But Rainer wasn't really hated at this point. He was just an obese and clumsy dimwit who dreamt of being like his YouTube idols. On top of that, he was still very unknown, and just a few forums had picked up on his shenanigans. This would all change with one fateful video.
Meddl Loide. Ich weiß, dass ein paar Arschlöcher da draußen meinen, ich sei das letzte Arschloch und der letzte Kasper und Drecksack und was weiß ich alles. Ich habe heute einen Aufruf an euch, kleinen miesen Drecksschweine. Irgendjemand hat meine Schwester mit einer PC-Computerstimme angerufen und gemeint, pass auf, ich weiß, wo du wohnst. Wer auch immer das war, traut euch, kommt zu mir, Altschauerberg 8 in 91448 Emskirchen. Traut euch, kommt zu mir und legt euch mit mir an, ich prügel die Scheiße aus euch raus.
Rainer got a lot of attention for this video, in which he blurted out his home address in order to save his sister from calls of members of a NSBM forum. At least that's what he thought, but it was most likely the village's youth whom Rainer's sister owed money to. But this was irrelevant at that point, because the damage was already done. Despite many news outlets claiming that the visits at Rainer's home address occurred after this upload, that is actually incorrect, but we'll get into that later on. This ridiculous outburst created more interest for online trolls, and it was the first time that a larger amount of channels dedicated themselves to re-uploading Rainer's videos or creating troll content. He garnered further attention when YouTuber Alexander Prinz, another fellow metal content creator at that time and one of Rainer's YouTube idols, paid him a visit. He first interviewed Rainer, and after that they did a room tour through the Drachenschanze together. These were the first real famous images of Rainer's disorganized and dirty living situation. The videos were a massive hit and brought Rainer to the attention of an even larger audience, which created an even more massive group of trolls. Rainer didn't like this at all, and he tried to lash out on the so-called haiders, another word which he completely butchered and that has since become synonymous with the Drachen game. But it was too late for him. The ball had already started to roll. And this is mainly due to Rainer himself. Despite Rainer's rather bad education, he still happens to be the best in just about everything. At least that's the illusion he created in his own head. Rainer is the prime example of a hardcore narcissist. Everyone who dislikes him is just a stupid hater, and even people who try to help him through constructive criticism are also just people who hate on him and try to keep him down. This horrible character trait is Rainer's biggest flaw and made him dug himself into his pit even deeper. Rainer couldn't just keep quiet and ignore his critics, but instead tried to provoke them for daring to confront his worldviews, which led to some of the most hilarious and ridiculous conversations I've ever seen.
Ich bin der Meinung, hätte man Amerika nie entdeckt und die Indianer hätten da ihr Leben weitergelebt, dann bin ich fest der Überzeugung, dass diese Menschen, die damals da lebten, heute sowas wie Elfen wären.
Hitler ist das beste Beispiel dafür. Ihn hat das Leid anderer Menschen kalt gelassen. Er hat sogar das Leid von anderen noch verursacht und hat seinen ganzen Hass, seine ganze Aggression auf eine einzige Gruppe geschoben. Und zwar auf die Juden. Jetzt sind es nicht mehr die Juden, jetzt bin's ich.
Nagellack für Männer. Alter, was bist denn du für ein 1990, also 1900er, Alter, was bist du für ein 19er? Ja, was bist du für ein 19. Jahrhundert, Alter?
There are hour-long compilations of his idiotic opinions, because this dude simply doesn't stop. But it wasn't done with simply talking absolute BS whenever he opened his mouth, but his narcissism led him to be a compulsive liar. No matter what stories he talks about, there's a 98% chance that he's lying through his teeth.
Ich habe jetzt auch endlich wieder meinen normalen Schlafrhythmus, früh um 9 Uhr aufstehen und oder um 8 Uhr aufstehen, irgendwas in dem Dreh. Dann um 8:30 würde ich auf Arbeit fahren. Um 7:30, Verzeihung. Heute habe ich bis 14 Uhr habe ich heute gearbeitet.
He even lies when he has absolutely nothing to gain from them. It's just so deeply rooted in his character that he can't stop it. And again, this behavior led to even more backlash and numerous compilations about his lies. Of course, Rainer doesn't understand that his despicable character is the main reason for viewers' aversions towards him. Instead, he wallows himself in self-pity and sees his struggles against the haiders as a battle that he has to win on all terms, just like an anime protagonist who has to fight the whole world by himself. Yeah, undefeated forever. Despite Rainer's enormous stupidity, he actually is clever enough to use his presented role as a victim of online bullying to beg for donations, which he did at an early stage on YouNow and now on TikTok and Tipeee. But this only works on people who just got to know him, because as soon as you gather more information about Rainer, the sooner you start to despise him. I call this the Haider-Evolution. Stage 1. Drachi. Drachis are supporters of Rainer who fall for his lies about his victimhood and, in the worst case, donate money to him and are shocked by the haters' relentless efforts to see Rainer wiped from the internet. Stage 2. Level Zeros. Level Zeros are haters who see through Rainer's online persona and see him for the person that he really is. But they still lack fundamental understandings of the Drachen game, its goals and its origins. Stage 3. Rainercologists. Rainercologists, which is a term that I've actually just made up, have gathered enough knowledge about Rainer to educate the Drachis about his true colors. Rainer is a pastime of theirs and they view the Drachen game a bit like reality TV, with the difference that this actually is real life and people can take influence on Rainer's life and the story of the game, but they won't really take action and view the game as spectators. They know about all his flaws and see through his lies as soon as they leave Rainer's disgusting lips. They're also completely familiar with the vocabulary of the Drachen game. Stage 4. Real haters. These are people who fulfill all requirements for Rainercologists but decide to influence the game. This happens through either content creation, pilgrimage to Rainer's current locations, or information acquisition about him. You may have become keen-eared when I said the word pilgrimage, but you heard that right. Let's take a closer look. One of the most famous and most discussed aspects about the Drachen game are visits that haiders pay Rainer. This development really started to gain traction in 2015 when Rainer decided to sell posters at his home and invited his fans to come and buy a copy. What Rainer didn't take into consideration was that this was the ideal chance for trolls to annoy him in person without being restricted through bans or silencing on his videos and live streams. And so, the Great Pilgrimage began. This is a very special trait of the Drachen game, which will probably never be repeatable for a couple of reasons. First of all, the village of Altschauerberg is incredibly rural and tiny, with less than 50 inhabitants. So there weren't really a lot of people who could have stopped the haiders. Secondly, the people who could have taken action acted completely passively, which still boggles my mind to this day. They endured the haiders, the chaos, the property damages and the noise throughout day and night, and never tried to change the situation.
Hey, gibt doch nichts zu meinen.
Wer soll mal die Fresse hältst, du Arschloch, Alter! Kleiner Hurensohn, hau ab! Lass mich in Ruhe, du Pisser!
It's almost surreal to think about that this rather small and ridiculous YouTube oddball created this phenomenon. His in-person interaction with his trolls in front of his own home are some of the funniest, shocking and most treasured moments of the Drachen game. These visits culminated in the so-called Schanzen-Fest on August 20, 2018, where about 800 trolls gathered in the village despite an assembly ban. The police was so overwhelmed with the mass of drunk and bored haiders that they actually had to call for backup from the nearby German Cup match between Greuther Fürth and Borussia Dortmund. Altschauerberg had never seen such a congregation, and the Schanzenfest went down in history as one of the highlights of the Drachen game. And what did Rainer do in the meantime? He barbecued on his inner courtyard, whilst the police acted as his own personal bodyguards. This was also the first time that Rainer gained nationwide attention, because a lot of news outlets picked on the story about the events of the Schanzenfest. But that doesn't mean that it was Rainer's first time on TV, because he managed to sneak into foreign news programs in similar fashion to Sam Hyde.
Полиции говорят, что мотивы преступления совершенно неясные, но почему же тогда стрелок в момент расправы выкрикивал странную фразу о том, что над ним...
Türden fotoğraflar da yayınlandı. Evet, o fotoğraflardan bir tanesi şu an ekranlarınıza geliyor. İddiaya göre o saldırıdan kısa süre önce internette manifesto yayınladı. Hatırlayın, Yeni Zelanda saldırganı da manifesto yayınlamıştı.
Could you imagine Chris Chan popping up on Russian TV? Me neither. But this is simply one of the facets of the Drachen game. Just like the facet of constant sexual harassment. Despite Rainer's constant pretension, there actually is one part of his life where even he knows that he's lagging behind. And that's his relations with women. Rainer often proclaims that he wants to live a normal life with a wife and a few kids, and that he'd love to be a caring father and husband. Thank God that this will never happen, but he would still try to get into contact with women at every chance he got. What he doesn't understand is that even when women are interested in him by some crazy miracle, he is the sole reason for why his relationships go down the tubes. Rainer is permanently driven by instinct. Women are simply objects of sexual desire and are treated by him as such, which is also fueled by his permanent influx of some really messed up adult films. Disgusting and encroaching text messages? Check. Unsolicited sendings of pictures of his genitals? Check. Disrespectful and demeaning behavior and intense jealousy towards women when they don't reciprocate his sexual advances? Triple check. Rainer would simply say that his actions are overt, but that doesn't excuse his disgusting approach and his views on women of them being of lesser value. Rainer also claims that he's bisexual, but that's purely out of necessity. Because no sane woman wants anything to do with him, he has to resort to men who are just as lost as he is. Due to Rainer's intense urges and cravings of sexual contact with women, this has become one of the easiest and most entertaining ways for haiders to troll him. Let me introduce to you the berries. Berries are female haiders, or male haiders disguising as females, who use Rainer's visceral urges to get closer to him and to gather information, or just make him look like a fool. The most famous example of this kind happened on August 19, 2015 on the so-called Mittwoch. Rainer had been chatting with a girl called Strawberry and invited her onto his livestream. By that time, Rainer hadn't even met her in person, and they had just been chatting for about 2 months. But Rainer wanted to do his big announcement live on the internet. His viewers had been warning him for quite some time that Strawberry was just a troll, but Rainer was, as always, absolutely obstinate. And so, Rainer did Rainer things, in front of thousands of viewers.
Also im Prinzip will ich dich hier live fragen, ob du mich heiraten willst. Nicht unbedingt der romantischste Antrag, aber ja.
Oh Mann. Ist das dein Ernst?
Ja, schon.
Und ich sollte jetzt eine Antwort drauf geben?
Prinzipiell hast du es ja schon getan. Es ist nur die Frage, ob du dazu stehst.
Okay. Also Rainer, du bist echt ein ganz besonderer Mensch. Und mit besonders meine ich, du bist der fetteste, dümmste Idiot, den ich je in meinem ganzen Leben gesehen habe.
Oh Mann, Rückwandstück, das ist ja großartig.
Ich stehe zu meinem Ziel.
Prösterchen!
Oh, wartet doch auf mich, Leute. Oh Mann, ja, Leute, ich bin Dorian, der Übermensch. Ihr kennt mich vielleicht aus Filmen wie VBT-Qualifikation 2015, das Lügenlord-Hörspiel. Herzlich willkommen beim Serienfinale. Neben mir sitzt meine bezaubernde Assistentin Erdbärchen.
Genau.
Ihr habt mich verarscht.
Meine Güte, Rainer. Es war wirklich gar nicht so schwer, dein fettes Herz für uns zu gewinnen, weißt du? Das war das Staffel.
Ich hoffe, das hat euch Spaß gemacht. Ich hab's gewusst, dass es so endet, war klar. Ja. Wartet mal kurz. Ich habe da nämlich noch was vorbereitet. Für alle Fälle. Die Frage ist jetzt bloß, wo ist es? Ach ja, hier. Weiß nicht, ob man es jetzt richtig hört. So, das ist mein brechendes Herz. Was soll's? Habt mich verarscht? Pff. Gut, von mir aus. Aber ihr werdet mich trotzdem nie besiegen, dass ihr das kapiert.
This event sparked another wave of interest into the Drachen game. Multiple YT drama channels cover the story, and Rainer received a lot of sympathy by people who didn't know anything about him. Despite the constantly growing amount of trolls and visits to his home, Rainer didn't stop uploading content and doing live streams. His attitude also started to shift. The somewhat likable idiot from the early days of his career was gone, and he became ever more erratic, obese, and arrogant. His moral decay also progressed, as he had no problem uploading videos of him onto the hub, in which he inserted certain toys into his massive hairy ass. He could have easily put an end to this situation by deleting his online presence and focusing on his real life, but he was too lazy to get a real job, and so he leashed onto the little money that he got from his ad revenues and donations. I mean, he could make a living of completely failing at video games for kids,
Exi, du bist ein verdammter Vollidiot!
making videos of him assembling sandwiches that looked like cat food, and giving his opinions that mostly consisted of about ball pens, hair gel and other irrelevant crap. You get the picture. He also treated his live streams, his main source of revenue at the time, as a punishment, where he did his obligatory 1 or 2 hours of streaming, not caring about the viewers and his chat and rambling on about the trolls. Yet he still thought that his content deserved more views and donations. But after all, his outbursts and his meltdowns are the only thing worth watching about him. His antics even made him appear on Count Dankula's channel 3 times. Just a proper mad lad, innit? He would actually garner close to 200,000 subscribers over the years and then started to make serious money in the last month of his YouTube presence. At times he earned between 4,000 to 7,000 euros, which he could keep in his pocket because he didn't bother with paying taxes. This development came to an end when Rainer decided to circumvent a strike on his channel by uploading videos onto his second channel. This constituted a violation of YouTube's guidelines, and so his channel was terminated completely on August 10, 2022. Since then, he's been active on Odyssey, TikTok and Kick. Why Kick and not Twitch? Well, Rainer shot himself in the foot once again.
Halte dich halt mal da fest, du Affennägel, ey. Jetzt müssen wir OG laut, Nigger. Bro, Nigger, Alter. Mann, pass mal auf die Straße auf. Nigger. Really? Nigger?
Rainer's brash and aggressive nature was his undoing several times. So he got into legal trouble on more than just a few occasions. One time he was sentenced to a fine of 900 euros due to battery and criminal damage on June 4, 2016. Another conviction took place on September 16, 2019, because he attacked pilgrims in front of his house with pepper spray. This time he was sentenced to 7 months on parole. Did Rainer maybe learn from his previous mistakes? I think you should know the answer by now. Rainer's most recent conviction took place on the 21st of October 2021. This time he stood trial because of grievous bodily harm, defamation and other offences. The outfit that he chose to wear for this trial is the stuff of legends. A face mask that covered about 1/4 of his giant face, a Slipknot shirt with a giant hole on his stomach, and shoes that he wore with slippers because the water retentions wouldn't allow him to put his stumps into them normally. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison without parole. So, case closed. Rainer went to prison, didn't he? Well, not really. His attorney appealed the conviction and the trial was held again on March 23, 2022. And this was one of those days that just seemed absolutely unreal. One of the accusers whom Rainer hit with a flashlight went into the courtroom with a noticeably bad-smelling breath. The defense attorney then asked him whether he had been drinking before the trial, to which he replied that he drank 2 beers. The rest of his testimony wasn't making the situation any better. Despite existing video footage of Rainer's attack, the flashlight imbecile tangled himself up with inconsistent statements and held Rainer's case massively. After his dismissal from the courtroom, he started to drink in front of the court with famous German YouTuber Max Herzberg and was soon absolutely pissed. He then got arrested after he started a fight with police officers in a drunk state. The other accusers didn't shine either, except for a police officer whom Rainer called an asshole. Finally, after 12 long hours, the judge ruled his sentence. 1 year on parole. Rainer got away again. The haters call this phenomenon Winkler luck, because no matter how bad Rainer's decisions are, he somehow still manages to save his neck. Other offenses like his constant defamations, his tax evasions, and his use of copyrighted materials didn't even make it into the courtroom yet. Anyway, in order to stand a chance in front of the jury, he decided to sell his residence to his hometown of Emskirchen. He sold it for around 70,000 euros. Rainer got absolutely ripped off, because despite the Drachenschanze's desolate condition, the property was over 25,000 square feet big with multiple buildings. Rainer probably didn't care. He just saw the money and couldn't resist the offer. And so, Rainer got the money and immediately lost around 25,000 in order to pay some of his debts that he accumulated. And the rest was also gone in next to no time, because he decided to buy himself a car. Now, tell me, which car would you buy if you knew that you're soon gonna be evicted and that haters will publish your current location at any chance they get? Something plain? Something that doesn't stand out of the crowd too much? Something cheap that leaves you a good amount of money? No. You would buy a bright blue Ford Ranger for 40,000 euros. Oh, and you'd also brag with your purchase, of course.
Das ist so ein richtig fettes Monster.
His spending spree didn't stop there. He also bought himself a brand new graphics card and VR goggles that he would be able to use for about 4 weeks before getting kicked out. And to add insult to injury, before buying his stupid truck, he already knew that he would have to undergo a medical psychological assessment, which is deadline he allowed to elapse, but I'll get into that later on. January 5th, 2022 rolled along and Rainer had to leave his home. Hang on a minute, that's not correct. The droger actually didn't give the slightest fuck about the deadline and only left on February 28 after the police paid him a visit. The lax justice system was once again Rainer's only friend. Nevertheless, he finally had to leave and started his road trip for Germany. His tumultuous life didn't catch a break. His first stop was a hotel at Frankfurt Airport, and the evil haiders spotted his ridiculous car immediately. Thus began probably hundreds of calls at the hotel's reception, and Rainer was subsequently kicked out. In the meantime, the Schanze was quietly demolished. The pilgrimage site was finally gone. Rainer didn't seem to care that much and continued his travels, staying in hotels and getting kicked out of them because of his, and I have to stress it again, stupid car that was seen over and over again. His road trip was put to an end after the police finally collected his driver's license. After that, he spent most of his time in Nuremberg and preferably on the so-called Zarenstein in front of the main train station. This is also the time where I had seen Rainer for the first time in person. I had a brief conversation with him and listened to his ever-repeating nonsense about how the haters got him into the situation and how he will bounce back from it, yada, yada, yada. It was a real struggle to not just say, Rainer, I know you're bullshitting. But I wanted to see if he would maybe spill some details, but the conversation stayed pretty shallow, unfortunately. The real shocker to me was that his gut looked even bigger in person, that his legs looked like they were about to rot at any given second, and that his smell was even harder to endure than I imagined. Anyway, after some time he basically created himself a new office in one of Emskirchen's bakeries, where Rainer's former neighbor and only real supporter Marion works to this day. They implemented rules like the ban of mobile phones just to accommodate his lazy ass. But after the bakery's headquarters received backlash from the haters for this, Rainer was without a roof again. This would stay this way until he met some shady individuals on TikTok. At this moment in time, Rainer resides in a pension in Saxony that belongs to men with affiliations to the National Democratic Party of Germany. You can't make this shit up. This guy, who made so many racist remarks in his life, but also claimed that he's anti-racist and that haters just twist his words, lives under the roof of a real neo-Nazi. There he streams on TikTok and is most likely involved in a money laundering scheme where criminals use TikTok to launder money from stolen credit cards. Now, we don't know if Rainer is aware of this because he's probably too stupid to understand what's going on, but he's still involved in it. Still, this isn't the worst. The latest accusations are really going to make your blood boil. Rainer allegedly touched a 3-year-old daughter of another resident of the pension inappropriately and is now under investigation. This becomes even more fucked up when you take Rainer's erotic short stories into consideration, in which he wrote a lot of stuff about rape and sex with children. The police was actually informed about this and they seized all his electronic devices at one point, but they didn't bother to go through them because it would have taken too much time and haters would have probably already published something if there was some truth to this. Un-fucking real. And it gets even worse, believe it or not. Rainer's alleged crime took place on January 3 of this year, and just a day later he published a blog in which he discussed his wish of founding a naturist community in which kids were explicitly welcomed. For a lot of haters, this incident marked the line where the innocent fun of the Drachen game turned into a dead serious, disgusting story that they are now involved in. We can only hope that this has not happened in any sort of form. Not because of Rainer, but because of the poor child whom we can only wish the best for. I want to wrap up this video with something a little more cheerful after you've heard about all his despicable antics. I want to talk about the haters. A lot of people say that the haters are just a bunch of scumbags that make the life of this poor man a living hell. And that's a point you can certainly press. But I want to shine the light on something a little different. And that's the amount of unbridled creativity. The sheer magnitude of different kinds of media to mock Rainer is almost unfathomable. Songs, parodies, cartoons, world of text, whole games, memes, audio dramas and documentaries. The list goes on and on and on and on. Even huge fandoms with a bunch of proper nutcases don't even come close to the incredible creative output that originates in the ranks of the evil haiders. Here are a few examples so you can get an idea of just how magnificent their creativity really is.
Throw your hands in the air, the music's true fire. I'm up on your pony pit, so for homies getting money, playing niggas like homies. Our game's still playing, so we better win it.
Aus jeder Niederlage gehe ich stärker hervor, als ich jemals war.
Du wirst verlieren, dich ruinieren. Lösch dich! Lösch dich!
Du bist, was du trinkst, du wärst gern ein Rockstar. Doch meist reichst du für Monster.
Die Haut ist kein Organ, davon entfernst du dich kein Jota. Rudi liegt hier wie Gott ihn schuf, nur Toter. Die Hater kommen zu dir nach Hause und stehlen deinen Kater, denn die Hater haben bekanntlich ja kein Leben wie dein Vater.
Du verballerst also circa das ganze Geld von Hausverkauf für ein neues Auto.
Und jetzt raus aus dem Wagen.
Really, nigga?
Willst du mal zucken, Alter? Willst du mal zucken?
Du wirst niemals die Nummer 1 bleiben.
Ich werde dich finden, ne? Ich werde deine Familie umbringen und dich dazu. Brauchst dich, sag's nochmal, Alter.
But it doesn't stop there. The haiders come together to screw Rainer in many other brilliant ways. Once, for example, Rainer had an argument with a TikTok user about him not lifting a finger for good causes, despite him earning quite a bit of money from his donors. Rainer was absolutely reluctant to acknowledge that and tried to come up with different excuses. So, the haiders took it into their own hands to donate multiple thousands of euros to the adversary's children's hospice, where he helped out voluntarily. In the end, Rainer got so much flack for his cheap excuses that even Mr. Selfish himself donated a tiny bit of money. See, the haiders aren't just generally spiteful trolls. There's just one particular lord who they deem fit for their shenanigans. There you have it. A short history of Germany's biggest lolcow. Is your brain finally completely deep-fried? Mine sure is. Anyway, I wish that I could get into this topic even deeper, but then this video would be 12 hours long. There's so much more to talk about. Side characters, special haiders.
Herr Winkler!
Halt die Fresse und nimm meinen Namen nicht in den Mund! Das ist viel zu heilig für einen Loser wie dich!
Rainer's Dang Midas touch, which turns everything to shit. Certain phrases that turn into memes, and a whole new dialect of German based on Rainer's way of speaking.
Hagebutene Klamotten.
He's basically not just a lolcow, he's almost a lol herd. Anyway, I'd really like to know your opinions about Rainer, his situation, and the haiders. Leave your message down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and Meddl off.